if you're listening to this and it's the morning. I know it's morning for Dr. Fallert and I as we record this. I am Carrie Hepburn and the founder of Compass PD. And today we are joined by my good friend and colleague, Dr. Natalie Fallert. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello, good morning or afternoon. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
As a team, we sit down, we discuss the different roles within the system and what needs to be on their radars at a given time, and the predictable problems those stakeholders will face. This information is based on our personal experiences in organizations and the trends that we notice in the school districts and the schools that we support nationwide. Compass PD supports our work for the podcast, much like we support the work that we do within a school district. Each part of the organization should complement, not contradict one another. So thinking about that complementary, we make sure that the work that we do in schools and districts is aligned with a scope and sequence of how a school year ebbs and flows. Today, I'm excited because Dr. Fallert is going to be sharing with you, teachers, information that will build on last month. If you didn't get to listen to last month, go back to our podcast, and today we'll build on episodes 18 and 19, where Dr. Fallert talked with you all about setting up the school year with your intentional planning and creating routines in your classroom. Today, we hope that you walk away with some information to set you up for success, and the predictable problems highlighted will allow you to be proactive rather than reactive. So here we are, Dr. Fallert. First few weeks of school, teachers are preparing for September. If they started school in August, what should be on their radars?
So I know that in our last two podcasts, we talked about the goal, or not goal setting. That's what we're going to talk about today is goal setting. We talked about the curriculum map planning and setting routines. Once you're into your classrooms a couple of weeks, you really want to be thinking about how you can help your students set goals for the quarter, the semester, the year, and using those goals within your class to drive your instruction and to drive their learning. So today I would like to kind of go over three things when it comes to goal setting. I have these three little buckets. One is the why we should be doing it and what it is that you're kind of asking of us. Another would be tips that could help teachers and students create those goals. And then the last one is the importance of monitoring or tracking your progress on those goals that you have set. So if we can get started, I would love to start with the why. And of course, we always have to start with Hattie's research in visible learning. He says that self-reported grades and student expectations has a 1.44 effect size. So this is like crazy amount of growth, right? And he explains this as students setting their own expectations for learning and monitoring their progress, which is a fancy term for student goal setting and tracking. So I don't want to just stop at Hattie, because in Classroom Instruction That Works, the CITW book, they have like a newer version and they have their older version, but they talk in here, or it provides empirical research from 16 different studies that point to one strategy that works with all content, all grade, all student populations. You guessed it, it is student goal setting and monitoring. We can add one more to the mix, and it is Marzano's has the new art and science of teaching. And this offers science-based strategies that motivate and inspire students. And so if you literally go to that section, it says, I know that our biggest ask, especially at the secondary level, is how do we get kids to be motivated and engaged in our classrooms? And so teachers are asking for this. They're noticing it as an issue within their classrooms. And the very first thing on the list to help with this is academic goal setting. So when we think about this research that's kind of coming from all over the place, it's saying that it is important for our kids to set goals, just as it's important for us to set goals in life. And I do have a quote from Learning That Sticks, which is a new book that we've kind of started reading here at Compass. And in this, there's a quote there, and it says, learning only occurs when the learner decides to learning something. And this to me is super important, that if a kid doesn't choose what they're going to learn or why they're going to learn it or how they want to learn it or to what degree they want to learn it, then it's telling you right here it's not going to happen. And so we want to set ourselves up for success and our students up for success and kind of put them in the driver's seat. Here's some of the why behind why we should be setting goals. So now we can move into the what. What type of goals should students be setting? And if you look at any type of educational information, there are kind of three goals that are pretty common. And I'm going to add a fourth one to the mix, but the three goals are number one, performance goals. And this is really like grade based. You see this, I see this a lot at the secondary level, like I want the A, or as long as I pass, whatever. It's kind of that performance goal. I know that it happens at elementary, but it's kind of that outcome based results, like I want an A.
Right.
Mastery goals are a little bit more on the learning goals. Normally they're centered around like course objectives or standards. It might be something like revise writing beyond simple grammar fixes to improve overall quality of writing. They fall a little bit more into digging into the content and the specific skills that you're wanting to master at that kind of grade level or content area. And then the third one is effort and behavior goals. And how much, this is kind of goes like, how much time or what activities will you do to reach these goals? And so when I think about, these are the three that you want to be looking at, and it's not saying pick one, it's not saying pick all, like you kind of have to decide within your class, like which ones you want. But I'm going to add one more, and I have the book somewhere around here. The book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about identity goals in this book. And so instead of it being like an outcome or performance goals, he wants you to kind of look at something like, so if it was an outcome based, it might be like, I want to read a book from cover to cover. He kind of offers this idea of creating goals that change your identity. I am a reader, or I want to call myself a reader. And then you start digging into, well, what is a reader? What defines it? And that then becomes, oh, a reader is somebody who reads a book from cover to cover. That's kind of a performance goal. Or it's a person who reads every day. That's a behavior goal. But you change that identity of yourself and saying like, what would a reader do? As a teacher, you need to decide what type of goals that you want your students to create. Performance goals are easy to create, and they're also easy to overlook. You may want to honor those in your class who need to understand, like who need you to understand that they want the A. So you have to hear their voice. Like if that kid's like, I want the A, I want the A. Okay, I hear you want the A. That's one of your goals. But you want to also let them set that goal very quickly because it's pretty easy. But then make sure that you're redirecting them to be like, well, what does an A student look like? What does it mean to have an A? So that you're pushing it beyond that, just that letter, and you're saying, what are the skills that you need to master? Or what are the habits that you have to adopt so that you can earn that A? And so as a teacher, honor their voice and that they want the A, but constantly try to coach in and be like, well, what does it mean to have that A, and getting them to shift a little bit to those mastery or behavior skills.
Nice. I do love that you added, I love that you added the James Clear's Atomic Habits and the identity goals. This reminds me of one of the videos that you had done on social media about the language that we use and the importance of the language that we use so that we can see ourselves as a reader, as a scientist, as a mathematician, and just taking it outside of the classroom. I work out on tonal all the time. And when you're on tonal, they call you an athlete. The shift in my thinking makes me work harder. Like I think, okay, athletes work hard. And then the difference in the choices that I make when I go choose what I'm having for breakfast or whatnot, I think about I'm an athlete on tonal because they told me I was. And so it does do some different, it plays like mind games with you. I think A is one thing, but pairing that is really thoughtful when you think, okay, if they have to do the performance goal, then helping them think through more, what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? I think is really good too. Thank you.
Now let's move on to some tips that a teacher could use when thinking about setting goals. A teacher must first decide what exactly you want from your students. Remember that teacher clarity has an effect size of 0.75. And yes, it is important to give kids choice, but it's okay for that choice to be like negotiated choice. If it's a reading class, let's say, they should not be setting math goals or even necessarily study habit goals. They should be fairly specific to the course that you have at hand. Consider creating your own goals as a teacher for like what you hope to achieve with your students. Share these with your students and then provide a list from them to choose from. If you want to create lifelong readers or like strong avid writers, those could be some of your goals. And if you really broke those down and fit them into your standards, if you're an English teacher, you're going to see where a ton of your standards fit into those goals. So if you can get kids to be avid readers or avid writers, I am pretty sure that they're going to get better at comprehension and they're going to get better at using language or uncovering vocabulary in their text. We know that you have to be a part of the practice in order to grow at it. And any way that we can get them to do that. If a teacher were to create their own goals and share those could even become like this overarching goal that it's like, okay, this is what the teacher wants of this class. Like, I want a community of learners. Well, what does that look like? Then you could start asking kids to create goals that help help you reach your goals. And it becomes a community effort and not just I'm not good at this or
Mhm.
I need to improve at that. You should also consider pulling the main course objectives for the quarter, the semester, or even the course, and maybe creating, a few of those that you could give to the kids and say, here are the course objectives. Which one of these would you like to be your goal? So it doesn't have to be something that they randomly pull out of their pocket. You could give them a set list to start with. And if you notice that that's too restrictive for them, you can always make it bigger. But sometimes if we throw them into the deep end of the ocean, it's hard to save them all. So starting
Right.
small and figuring out what that might look like in your classroom. It is going to be imperative that you explicitly teach goal setting. And even if you think that they've done it every year up until now, or they're doing it in another class, or the counselor pulled them in advisory to do it, you still need to show them what it looks like to set goals in your classroom. You might need to have a conversation with them about the difference between short and long-term goals and explaining the difference between those two. And you can still ask for both. So by the end of the semester, a kid might want, like their goal might be to read 7 books by the end of the semester. That's a long-term goal. Well,
Mhm.
what's the short-term goals that are going to get you there? Oh, I'm going to read 20 minutes daily. I'm going to read, those shorter goals are going to be the ones that you're going to find success in and you're going to find celebrations. And that's going to keep the momentum going. You want to model by showing them your goals and how you kind of came up with them and what are the shorter like habit forming goals that you're going to set. So if I had a classroom and I wanted to create a community of learners, then that could be my goal at the end of the semester. But I'm going to have to say, like, what does that look like? What does a community of learners look like? So I might show them like it's kids talking about text, it's kids eager to learn. Like I have this list, right?
Mhm.
And then I might say, this first week, I'm going to try as a teacher to offer you guys opportunities to talk every day. And that's my short-term goal for this week is can I do
Yeah.
this? And so showing them how those little conversations today feed into that bigger goal at the end. And that's how you created yours. And then you could ask them to create theirs. Making sure that the goals are specific and measurable.
Mhm.
This is the question I would ask is there a portrait of success? Sometimes that might be a rubric or it might be a breakdown of the actual objective that you have. Like it might be something that you already possess. It might be something that you have to create with your kids. So if your kids say, I want to be a reader, okay, well, what does a reader look like? And literally they could create like a progression chart that says something like, a reader brings a book daily, and a reader opens that book daily, and a reader reads from that book daily, and a reader reads, multiple books in a week or whatever. So there's this progression along there, and they can say, where am I right now? So if I'm not a reader and I don't ever bring a book, I'm going to start right there. And that might be my first goal is I'm just going to bring a book every day. That's it. I don't even have to get it out.
Right.
I don't even have to look at it. But if somebody asks if I have it, it's on my person. I have it because it's the first step. creating that progression or letting your students create that progression of what this looks like, then will help them determine where they are and what goals they want to start on. Another tip I would give is figure out how to link individual goals to your group goals. And it might be, if as a teacher, I want them to be a community of learners or whatever that looks like, then each week or you're check in on that, giving them the opportunity to not only say how they're attacking that goal, but how that goal is contributing to the team. Because we know that on a basketball team, you have lots of players. There's only 5 on the court at a time, but you have kids sitting on the bench and they all are bringing something different at different levels and different expertise to the team to help the team move forward. The team's goal is to win the game, but I can't shoot, I can't dunk the ball, but I can shoot 3-pointers. I'm not going like, how do I fit into the puzzle piece of winning the game? And it could be that I'm sitting on the bench and I'm cheering on my team. That could be part of my contribution. But figuring out how do you make it part of a bigger community is going to help drive all of this in its success, because kids are, that peer pressure is like a huge effect size, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just know that because that's life. And another thing to think about is focusing on growth. Of course, we want them to master the skills, but when it comes to tracking and monitoring progress, you really need to focus on growth, because we don't want to be the nope, you didn't get, nope, it's not there. It's the not yet, or the look how far you've come, because if they can just move a little bit, that's better than where they were before. And James Clear in this book, he talks about the rule of 1%. And he says, if you can get 1% better every day, at the end of the year, you are 37% better. So I think about this. I don't care who you are and in what education. How many kids have you ever seen grow 37%?
Right.
No one. I mean, like, it doesn't happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's,
I mean, we are happy with 5% gain, 10% gains, double digit, but 37% is crazy. And so if I even got half of that, like, okay, but it's that idea of like focusing on something little and you're growing, you're growing, you're growing. And that growth can also go backwards. So if you're negative, it can go in another direction. Thinking about how do I keep it positive and moving in that positive direction.
I love this. And I love this because I just finished reading the 1% rule, the book, and he was talking about part of what's so difficult about goal setting and achieving goals is consistency. So we have to just be simple and be consistent. Every day we show up. Every day we focus on this goal. And I thought that was just a really nice way of telling us to stop like letting all these other distractions and things pull on our time and find a way that this is our goal as a class. This is so timely, Natalie, that we're kicking off the year with this and setting teachers up for this. But consistency is key.
Yeah. And I think keeping it, like you just said, keeping it simple and very straightforward of what's something that's doable. You don't, even when they're setting those goals at the very beginning, you want small wins, because that's going to create those opportunities for bursts of dopamine. And then they're going to associate that emotion with that habit. They're going to be like, oh, I can do this. And so getting them, whatever that is, those small wins are going to be really important. And some kids are going to start in one spot and some kids are going to start in another spot. So for instance, if it's a reading habit, you might have some kids who are easy, like I can read 20 minutes every day. But then you have other kids who they don't even bring a book. So the fact that they brought a book today, they get a high five and they get to sit there for the 20 minutes while everybody else is reading. Like they might pick it up and read it, but don't hound them. Be happy that they brought the book. And then next week you could say, hey, can we get the book out and set it on our desk this week? Like that's what readers do, right? That's the next step. And it might not, I'm pretty sure that if they bring the book, they'll probably set it out on their desk on day 2. But letting them, opening the door and letting them walk through is going to be super important when it comes to this, and not pushing them, because, hey, if the kid brought the book, it's better than they did the day before when they didn't have one. And so even as a teacher, celebrate the wins, not that, well, everybody else is reading, why aren't you reading? They're not there yet. They're not, it's not their day to walk yet. They'll walk eventually, but let them uncover it. And getting them to reflect back on the rubric. Well, what does a reader do? Oh, they actually hold the book there. Well, they actually read it. Read a page. And so one kid might be reading 20 pages, another kid can read one. But that's one more page than what they read the week before. And the last tip, which is going to move us into, you have to provide opportunities for them to like monitor, track their progress. And it has to be kid driven, not teacher driven. And I'm going to say, really be cautious about it being points or a checkbox. There has to be value in that. And so when we talk about monitoring, tracking, we'll dig a little bit more into that. Let's move on to monitoring and tracking. Depending on your class and the goals that you're going to be setting with your students, some of these may not be, they might be very long-term goals that are at the end of the semester or even the end of the year. And that is too far of a gap. You have to make sure that you're kind of checking on these weekly and providing opportunities for them to share and celebrate or adjust their success toward that goal. Because if not, then they're going to forget about it. And it might be something that you say every Friday, we're going to do this. And it becomes this 10-minute community, share with your partner and then share out. And let's talk about successes. You really, in this monitoring and tracking piece, you want to be thinking about how can you build relationships with either partnerships or small groups of 4 where they support each other. And maybe they're all 4 kids working on the same goal or a similar goal, or maybe they're a group that sits together, whatever it is. But that idea of like, if something's not working for me, I can be honest with this group and say, I didn't read as much this week as I wanted to, or I didn't do my homework. And the group can say, how can we help you? Because you're part of our team and our team is trying to reach this goal. So how can we help? That's kind of one thing to be kind of thinking about is how can you set up a routine within your classrooms where kids are checking on this goal at least I would say weekly, and how are you also asking them about those goals? One thing that you could also think about, and I say this with trepidation, and that is you could take their tracking for a grade, but it cannot be, oh, did you fill out this chart? Or because then it just becomes a checklist and signatures and they're faking it. But maybe an honest reflection on their goals or their progress. So a kid looks and says, this was the goal that I had for this week. I was going to bring my book every day. I brought it 4 out of the 5 days. The day that I forgot it, like, and they're very honest with that reflection. Okay, if that's awesome. And if they offer a suggestion, or if their group mates offer them a suggestion and they're receptive to that suggestion, then you could say, you got 5 points today for tracking and monitoring and self-reflecting on your goal. But let's say you have a kid who actually is doing what they're supposed to do. So they're reading 20 minutes every day. That was their goal. And they're like, yeah, I'm reading 20 minutes every day, but they're not really pushing themselves. They're not self-reflecting. You could say, well, you only get 4 out of 5 points on your goal setting because, yeah, you're doing what you're supposed to do, but how is it making you better at, like, how are you reaching that goal? And so shifting it to the effort and the habits versus did you do this or did you not? And are you providing evidence that shows, yes, I'm doing this, or yes, I'm getting better, or I didn't get better, but I'm going to keep trying, or I didn't get better and I'm going to try something else. So it's not about necessarily their growth. Their growth is part of learn, fail, try again, all of those things. And that's going to take some time for a teacher to sit down and wrap their brain around, like, how do I support and put a grade behind this? But it is possible to do. And in the, like, also in the tracking and monitoring, James Clear also talks in his book about
Such a great book.
it's called the Valley of Disappointment, he calls it. And he's got this great little visual, and it's like, this is what we think is going to happen. Like, I'm starting here and I'm going to bring my book and read every day, and my reading's going to go up. And he goes, that's what we think is going to happen. Well, what actually happens is we start here and there's this dip, and then it goes up. And he goes, this dip is called the Valley of Disappointment. And a lot of times people give up in that dip. They think it's not working. I need to change. So there are times that it's not working and you need to change. But if you're just not sure if it's not working or it's not yielding the results that you want yet, if it's a proven strategy, oh, if I'm reading 20 minutes every day, I should be eventually getting better. Okay, I need to just keep doing it. I'm just in that valley of disappointment. So anytime you add or change something, you might have that dip before it goes up. It's that learning curve. And don't be discouraged by that, and teach that to your kids. Explain that to them so that they don't look at themselves as failure. that, you know, all right, are we reflecting on what's going on? Let's reflect enough. Have we reflected enough that we need to make a change? Or are we starting to see it go up in the direction that we want it to go to? And I
That
would almost say
remind
that that's probably like a predictable problem because it's most likely going to happen.
For sure. It reminds me of the 1% rule that I just read. And they were talking about a lot of times people will set goals and one of the questions that he asked in the book, it was rhetorical, was, how long do you think it is? How many days do you think it is before somebody quits their goal? Like when do they quit? And it was day 2. Typically by day 2, they're just like, nope. Day 2, day 3, they're out because it's work. Setting the consistency, you just have to do it and be ready that it's not going to be like instant. And so I think
Right.
that aligns with his thinking with that. It's so fascinating. I do want to throw in,
It also reminds me of like that starting small, that you can bring your book every day. That's doable. And so I'm a reader because I wrote my book, and it gets you past that second day, that third day hump. And you're like, oh, I've done this. I can add one more thing to the list. I can touch it and open it. So
which goes along with his Atomic Habits book, Habit Stacking.
yes.
So I feel like everyone needs to buy the Atomic Habits book and read it, and then the 1% rule, and then all the others that we've been talking about. I was thinking really quickly about how I found some tips that I used in my classroom when it came to monitoring student goals, and I'm coming from an elementary perspective, so this may not feel doable for some. One of the ways that I checked in on student goals was regular conferencing. So I knew that I could make it through all of the students in my class in 2 weeks. And that way, part of my conferencing was, how are we doing on our goals? What is our goal? And I actually had notes on every student and what their different goals were in the different things. So that was something that worked for me. And that was what I ended up using toward the end of my career. Early in my career, one of the things that I would do is, in the morning when students walk in your classroom, they have to make lunch choice, put up their backpack, put up their library books, get all their things out, give you any notes from their parents. All of these things are kind of happening, and there's about 10-15 minutes where it's just chaos when kids are coming in. You're trying to figure out who's here, who's not. Something that I would do is, I used that kids would come in and they knew, put their stuff up, make their lunch choice, and that they would lay out their notebook that their parents would have notes in, and then stuff about their homework, and that's where their goals were. So every single morning as they were doing their work, they would hurry up, get those procedural things done, and then start reading independently, quietly. And I would go around and check every single student's notebook within 10-15 minutes. And by then, every kid's in the class, somebody's already taken attendance to the office, taken the lunch count to the office, everyone's gone to the bathroom, all the things are where they need to be, and we can immediately start class after the pledge and the morning announcements. So that was another tip that worked for me.
And I think
So,
that
yeah,
using conferencing can work, in an English, any class, if you're conferencing with kids, you can always ask them about their goals at any age. But I love that structure that you used, to help kind of stay on task with that.
I think something that does is it shows kids that you see them, you value the goals that they're setting, and that you're going to hold them accountable.
Yes.
So let's move into now, as we think about this time of the school year, all of the work that you've been talking to them about goal setting, what is the predictable problem or problems they will face?
Well, I think some of them I kind of touched on, is just that looking at, making sure that you are setting aside time, and that you yourself are coming back to it, and try not to get it to where the kids have to find value in it. So that's going to be a
Mhm.
predictable problem, is how do you get them to find value in it?
Mhm.
Another thing that a lot of teachers might be like, I don't know where to start. And I need something easy, in a sense. If you listen to Dr. Brenner's podcast about data, I don't know what number it was like 21 or 22, I think, but she talks about how you get the screening data at the beginning of the year. Pretty much everybody has some type of screening data at the beginning of the year. Even if you're at the high school level, you most likely have given your kids a benchmark, or you could use their test from the year before. But you could use that as a way to set goals, giving the kids that actually explaining it to them so that they're not like, my kids walk home with an I ready form and they are just like here, and they don't even know what it means. They have
Right.
absolutely no clue. And so if a kid should be able to go home and tell their parents where they fall on this, what, oh, I'm struggling in comprehension, or maybe the kid is doing fairly well in comprehension and they want to continue to do well in comprehension. So we don't always have to find the deficits. Let them start with something they're good at and get better at it so that they can find some success. So use that data that you are given, because you have to give that test anyways, to help create some of those goals. And if you can also use that screener, I know that at the secondary level, we used to give our kids the STAR test, and by 7th grade, they're jaded. Like, they're just clicking
Yeah.
buttons, they don't care. So you question a lot how accurate the results are because the kid hasn't bought in. And so if you attach their goals to that screening sheet and they're looking at it, it might reinvigorate their buy-in for that test and make it a little bit more like a game. So I think that those are two things that I think would be predictable problems or things to be thinking about that could jump you into this process if you've never done it before.
Hmm. I love the intentionality of tying them together and bringing value to that work that the students are doing when they give us their time and their effort on the assessments that they're taking. And I think it does show them that we're looking at them. A lot of times they think it's done to them, and honestly sometimes it is, but this can be more intentional, more thoughtful, and bring more effort into that.
This whole idea of like looking at a test and assessing and really breaking it down. This is how I tutor kids with the ACT, and I just do it kind of on the side. I don't even try, like I'm saying this on a podcast. I don't charge people. Like, I just do it because there's an easy way to do it. And literally what we do is I give them a test and we go down and we analyze it. We figure out, what are you doing well? What are you not doing well? What are your patterns? And then I give them choice and I say, which one do you want to tackle? You need to answer 4 more questions to get this score. You need to answer 8 more questions to get this score. And when they start doing that, I tell parents all the time, like, you as a parent can want to hire me all day long to raise their ACT score, but they have to want it. If they don't want it,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter. And so, and I don't even, I literally, I'm not joking. I don't make them do drills or anything. I give them the test and I say, this is what you're messing up on. And they look at it and they're like, oh, and they start seeing the patterns. And I go, one of two things: either figure out that you suck at that question and skip it, or learn how to do it. If you want to learn how to do it, I'll show you some resources in order to get there. And then immediately we go back to the very first thing that I said, that about that quote, that if the learner doesn't want to do it, then they're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they raise their scores, because they choose what they want to tackle, they learn it, and then they transfer it to that test.
Thank you so much for your time on this. It's really been incredibly valuable. I think teachers are going to walk away with a lot of excellent tips for them and easy, practical ways they can get started with goal setting.
Well,
I
thank you
want
for
to,
having me and letting me share my thoughts.
we always love it. We love it. I want to remind everyone that Dr. Fallert was here for podcast 18, where she talked about cultivating classroom excellence, insights from a seasoned educator, and episode 19, embracing classroom routines for enhanced learning and well-being. Check those out if you haven't listened to those yet. They are very valuable, and they're a great foundation to what she talked about today. Next week, I'll be joining you on the podcast and we'll be talking about calendars, communication, budgets, and data. And I'll be talking about that with district leaders. So stay tuned next week for that information. Finally, if you didn't know, we have a big goal of impacting 1 million students learning. One way you can help us reach that goal is you can share this podcast with a fellow educator and hit the subscribe button wherever you subscribe to your podcast. Thanks so much, Dr. Fallert. It was a great time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.